Hey guys, thanks for joining us on the Attachment Point News Roundtable. Today we have Rob Galbraith, the author of The End of Insurance as We Know It. Rob's actually a best-selling author now through Amazon. His book's available on paperback and Kindle. It's exceptional. I've just read the introduction so far, but the premise is great. And startups, VCs, incumbents, there's meat in there for everybody to enjoy, kind of help them progress in their insurance career. Nick will be on the podcast as well, rounding out the catastrophic risk conversation and talking startups. Enjoy. All right, guys, today we have a big episode of the Attachment Point News Roundtable. We got Rob Galbraith here with his new book. Nick's captaining the ship as always, and exciting stuff. Yeah, we have an Amazon bestseller author on here. This is the first time I think we can say that. Welcome, Rob. Excited
Thanks.
for you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So it's been a pretty wild ride so far. Pretty interesting, sort of the pre-launch. Then you guys have the big launch party coming up in Chicago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This Tuesday. So it's crazy to go from a 20-year career at USA to my last day was yesterday, was Friday, to unemployed underwriter and best-selling author. So book launch party in Chicago, downtown Chicago Tuesday. We got about 50 people signed up.
That's
so I'm
awesome.
real excited. I got to give a plug in to our sponsors. So Urban Stat, Arturo, and Pat West, Hedge Quote, coming in with the strong sponsorship. So real appreciative of those guys.
That's cool.
It's a free event. We're supposedly going to have the best gin in the world. So if meeting the author and buying a copy and getting your book signed isn't good enough, then that's reason enough to come to the event.
Is it Trump gin?
I don't know.
No.
British gin. That's a good question.
Wait. Who's the actor now that sells gin?
The guy. No,
he's the
Bradley
tequila guy.
something. The guy from Deadpool. Brad. Who's the guy from Deadpool? Brad. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Quick talking guy, funny dude.
Maybe it'll be that gin. I don't know. I was going somewhere with it, and that was.
Oh, Ryan.
Oh yes. Yes, Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds. That's right.
So hopefully it's his gin.
Yeah.
I will actually be there in Chicago.
Nice.
So flying in that morning, Rob. So we'll meet up. But I'm pretty excited to be a part of this. I just think it's phenomenal. You had a great career. Your nickname is the most interesting man in insurance. For anyone that's like listening, can you give a little bit of backstory about that and why? Talk about some of the things. Like go back your 20-year career and talk about some of the highlights, the things that you sort of remember. I mean, I've known you for a few years now, but there's just when I think of Rob Galbraith, I think of helicopters and volcanoes, and So what do you
I just accepted the title. I just was like, he's the most interesting man in insurance. That's all I need to know. Yeah.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
20 years. Talk about 20 years.
Yeah, sure. So, so I actually was an economics major at Michigan State, go green, go white. And I had my first job out of school at the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C., which was incredible. I was a research assistant, kind of working with a PhD economist, setting monetary policy. My claim to fame was I did have a memo that said from Rob Galbraith to Alan Greenspan that I had to drop off in his inbox. I actually had two secretaries, two different inboxes. And so I asked her one week, I was like, there's 80 research assistants here. We're all dropping off memos. Does he actually read any of these? And she said, oh, yes, absolutely. She said, he takes them home and he reads them at night in his bathtub. And I just got this mental image of Alan Greenspan in his bathtub reading my memo that I will never, ever get out of my mind. So I'm happy to share that with you guys. But I moved to San Antonio for personal reasons, and a buddy of mine at the Federal Reserve said, whatever you can do, get on with USA. They're a great company. They insure military members and their families. And I never heard of it. I didn't know about USA. I didn't know about insurance really at all. And so I started there working in the HR department using some of the SAS and the analysis skills that I had developed just to help people know, what's working with our workforce. And after a couple of years of watching the CEO at the time kind of get on and talk about our business results and all that, just having that business background, I was like, man, I work at this company. I have no idea how we make money. I just don't know anything about our business or our operation. So I really want to learn more. So I had the opportunity to move to the finance area. And that's when I got my CPC designation, Chartered Property Casualty Underwriter, in 2003. My boss at the time, he said, basically, just take one of them just to learn the industry. And I passed it, and I loved it. I loved learning about it. So I went ahead and I did the whole thing. And then I had the opportunity to move over to our pricing area, first kind of supporting their analytical needs, and then actually being a pricing analyst for about a year, which was great. I mean, that really gave me a good foundation in the business. I could not pass those pesky actuarial exams, though. I just was not cut out for that kind of hardcore math. I'm really good at arithmetic and really bad at triple integrals. So I had the opportunity in 2005 to move over to the underwriting department, and that's where I spent the bulk of my career. And so I moved around a little bit, but really kind of where I got the nickname that Nick gave to me, so I have to credit Nick for that, was really specializing in underwriting catastrophic risk. And what I tell people is, everybody's competing for that, farmhouse in the middle of Iowa that's not going to be subject to anything except maybe an occasional hailstorm, right? So the non-catastrophe stuff, you're just making very thin margins on that. Everybody's competing for that business. The catastrophe stuff, that's where you can make a decent profit, right? There's some decent margins there. You just got to avoid losing your shirt. And that's easier said than done, of course. So I know, Nick, you fully appreciate that, and your history, right, and particularly your current role, right, as a flood MGA and stuff. So, all's good, right, and collect all the premiums until the flood happens, and all of a sudden, you can get wiped out pretty easily if you don't know what you're doing. So, just trying to gain that competitive edge, right, and trying to see what was out there. Started working with insurtech startups, and I would talk to meteorologists, I would talk to structural engineers, I would talk to forest ecologists, I would fly to these places, I would look at where wildfire had been, or go to hurricane conferences. I was, riding along with independent adjusters following Irma and on rooftops, kind of looking at what they're looking. I did have the opportunity to go to Hawaii and kind of, look at the lava flow and talk to the U.S. Geological Survey about Kilauea. In fact, funny fact, I happened to be out there to do a presentation at a wildfire conference, and I kid you not, the hour after I landed, they had the earthquake that led to the Kilauea explosion that led for like 6 months. And I had a day before my conference, so I hiked in the park, and like the next day they closed the park for like 6 or 8 months. So I feel like trouble started following me everywhere. But it was really just to try to get as much information I could to be intelligent riding those risks. So some great adventures. You mentioned the helicopter ride with the San Diego Fire Department, and kind of seeing through their eyes what they saw and some of the dangers. And honestly, we all think about the forest and the wildfire, but for them, they have a big problem with homelessness in San Diego. And Brett, I know you can appreciate this. It's true all over places in California, and they're worried about somebody just starting a fire, right, to keep warm at night, and it kind of running up an embankment from a freeway all the way to a neighborhood and things like that. So we're thinking about the forest fires, but really you could have a pretty severe wildfire right in the middle of town. So just kind of going on those adventures, seeing it, not just looking at a spreadsheet, but actually being there, talking to the experts. And I enjoy meeting people outside the insurance industry as much as I do within our industry.
Kind of got a random question about the Hawaii thing being right there. I feel like lava sounds super intense, but when you're actually there, it's like a slow moving kind of, it's not just rushing everywhere, just reg spewing. It's just kind of like, just like tar rolling down a street or something, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? So if you watch SportsCenter, you're getting the highlights of the game, but the game itself might have been boring, right? So think about the Super Bowl, what a boring game that was. If you just saw like a couple of the highlights, you might be like, oh, it looked like a pretty close, low-scoring game, competitive game. But all of us that sat through it were like, oh my God, what a snoozer. Although Nick accepted, right? At least he liked the outcome. But you can't pretend you actually liked that game, Nick. So.
I think I'm in the minority. I don't want to get too, but I feel like 3 yards in a pile of dust. It was like the kind of football my grandpa loved. Just suspense. One touchdown wins the game. I kind of didn't mind it. I don't shootouts where everyone's just running past each other. I don't know.
Man, I love that Rams-Chiefs game, Brad. That was 54-51. That was my kind of game.
They gassed themselves out, though. The Rams had nothing left after that.
Exactly.
That's funny.
Speaking of lava, I love someone had a tweet that said it had like a picture of Hawaii, and it said where people think the lava is located in Hawaii, and it was basically like half the state was red. And it said where the lava really is, and they had the picture of Hawaii, and it was a tiny little red dot, So it's like if you watch the news, it's just like, oh my God, the island is falling, evacuate. but it's just this tiny little area. It's
Yeah, you've always taught me that, Nick. Like, I always panic about stuff. I'm worried about global warming. I'm worried about fire. I'm worried about all that stuff. Nick's like, it's not as bad as the news looks. It's not as bad as everyone thinks. There's not floods everywhere all the time.
To your point, guys, like wildfire only counts for 5% of all fire losses, right? Your regular old kitchen fire, structure fire, home fire, that's 95% of fire losses. But we think wildfire is so devastating because it gives you those great visuals, right? That wall of flame or that glow kind of over the horizon. But it's totally kind of I'm not saying it's not a serious issue, right? But, we don't think of kitchen fires nearly the same way, but that causes the vast majority of home destruction.
I may have had a Coleman or a Weber incident that I won't go into detail here, but that could have caused some structural damage. But luckily, no, we're okay.
good. It's glad you're here.
Yeah.
Can you guys both show the book?
I don't know where mine is. I've been reading it. I think it's in the car.
Rob, can you show the book?
Sure.
I got it right here. Yeah, I told Brad he needs to buy another copy since he's lying. He needs to buy 5 more too. That's fine.
Christmas presents. It's early.
So the end of insurance, as you know it, talk about that. First, when did you start thinking like, I have something to say, I want to write it down?
Great question, Nick. So for me, I actually started about March of last year. So it's been almost a year-long process. And, 2 things kind of happened to coincide that led to the genesis of the book. The first was we actually had an Insurance Nerds meetup here in San Antonio in the first quarter. And so, Nick, unfortunately, I know you were unable to make it at the last minute, but Carly and Tony were able to make it. And we had a nice meetup of probably about 25 folks here in San Antonio. And the next day we drove up to Austin to meet with Ryan Deeds and kind of talk some shop. And so I was kind of happy to escort folks on the way. That was when Tony actually shared with me that Insurance Nerds had been working with Bill Wilson on When Words Collide. And so I was pretty excited that somebody as respected as Bill in our industry that could really go with anyone, right, to publish this book, would pick Insurance Nerds to publish 40 years of wisdom through. And so that kind of changed my perception a little bit of Insurance Nerds from a great outfit with a lot of articles and podcasts and great content, and a book that Carly and Tony wrote, Insuring Tomorrow, to actually a book publisher. And so, the next thought was kind of well, if I would ever write a book, right now I know who I would reach out to publish it. And it just so happened at the same time that there's so many articles out there. I'm very active on social media, so all sorts of tweets and posts and whatnot about what's going on with InsurTech. I was meeting with several folks myself, so I had a little bit of an insider view of the industry. But obviously, there's a way more startups and way more people involved in it than just the little segment that I had interactions with. And honestly, it was almost a personal thing to say, I got to make sense. This is all swimming in my head. Yeah. So I just wrote it all down, and I literally put it in a file. I called it brain dump, and it was just a mismatch of all the stuff that was in my head, and then turning it in kind of outline and a structure, and then filling in each one of the chapters into a cohesive book. It was almost a personal thing for me, right, just to kind of figure it out, and hey, something's going on here that I'm trying to learn and understand. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized, hey, I'm not alone in that journey, right? And so whatever musings or thoughts I have, if I can give it some voice and some structure and publish it for other insurance professionals that are really fascinated with where we are today and where we're headed, that they would find value out of it as well.
Yeah, it's a really impressive work. I'm surprised you just started it a year ago. It reads great. I just read the intro so far, but I love the premise, not to give anything away, but, maps versus GPS, and kind of, comfortable route versus a strategic one. I don't know. It's really good. I'm really surprised to hear you just had the idea a year ago and it came together that quickly and that well, especially while, having kids, having a full-time job. I know Nick's got some little kiddos, got an older daughter as well. He's, got a startup. It's impressive the work people do in this industry. And to take like a minor aside, like it's so weird. That's a passion industry, even just, and I'll just do like a quick second, but just with Ryan stepping out today and people tuning in to like say bye to him, I'm like, what other job do you have? Like, I was a commercial moving salesman. There was no like Saturday AM podcast for commercial moving salesmen to share their ideas about office relocation. And real quick, while we're on the book, so you got New York and you got Boston coming up too, right? Like, I don't know what days those are. I'll make sure to put them on our post.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're real excited. So the idea of the book launch party is just to kind of have a meetup, gather around the book. It's a chance for folks to get together, to talk about it. Of course, love them to get a copy of the book, and happy to autograph it.
Cool.
But it's really meant as a networking event and a chance for me to meet folks. Have a little bit of a dialogue. No big speeches, and yeah, just a way to kind of promote it. And, I honestly hope to start a conversation with it.
Yeah.
That's really the part. So I always ask people, I said, tell me what resonates with you about the book. Tell me where you disagree. Where do you think I'm off base? I want to know that too. And where do you see the future of insurance headed? That, I have a little bit of crystal ball in there, but, I don't have any inside information, right? I can just kind of tell you the way that I'm thinking about it or whatnot, and hopefully that resonates. So, yeah, the book is a finished product, right, that you can buy, but it really is a beginning in some senses, not an end, right? And those meetups are really just start a dialogue. If folks want to start book clubs, there's already been some talk about that and stuff. So I'm thrilled. So I hope to do more. We have 3 that are definite. So the one in Chicago that's coming up this Tuesday. We have one that's going to be in New York City on Tuesday, March 19th. It's hosted by Enigma Technologies, which is kind of near the Chelsea area. And so right in the heart of Manhattan, which would be great.
Cool.
And then I'm really excited that on Monday, March 25th, we are going to have a book launch party at the Insurance Library in Boston. So this is an institution that's 140 years old. Paul Trutrot just became their executive director. He's formerly of NAMIC, and he's done a great job just kind of promoting that venue. It's a historic venue that he's really looking to kind of just step up its profile. A lot of insurance professionals I've spoken to that live in the Boston area actually have never been. They've either never heard of it or they've heard of it, but they've never been to the library. And so this is a great way to kind of introduce folks to a pretty special venue in our industry in Boston. So that one is Monday, March 25th.
Cool. I will get all these details out. Have you ever been there, Nick? To the
I have.
Right,
I've taken a CPCU class there.
Cool.
It is a library, so it's not just like a building where there are rooms and you take classes. Like you can go in, you can research. They have all of the periodicals.
Cool.
So it's a serious place. And as Rob said, it's an institution. So it's in an old building. It has a very historic feel. It's right in the financial center of Boston, down near the waterfront. I'm looking forward to it.
So it's really interesting for me. I know people talked about maybe potentially a bubble in InsurTech and then it winding down. I've heard before VCs will make a bunch of bets and then they'll see how they go. And I thought maybe the betting was done, for the bulk of insurance. They'll be watching this stuff mature. But then the news comes out that Allianz has $1 billion to deploy. And my mind just goes to like, how do you do that well? How do you find $1 billion worth of things to invest in? And like, it also makes me think I should just stand something up really quick and write a nice white paper and just see if, it clicks. But what do you guys think? Think this next year is going to be defined by Allianz? And that they're more on the reinsurance a little bit further back in the stack, right? So, I mean, that's going to be more infrastructure.
No, Allianz is the largest insurance company in the world.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I know. They're definitely.
Them or Chubb.
Okay.
But, they're German, and they're a carrier. They're gigantic.
Do you think they'll have like the full spectrum of investments they'll be making if the fund's that big, or do you think it'll be more structural kind of?
Yeah.
And
I'd like to hear Rob's opinion first on that. He wrote you got the end of insurance. I almost feel like it's the end of InsurTech 1.0.
I can see that.
Like there's definitely something in the air. The stuff that we used to talk about is kind of over. I think it's maturing into something else now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Nick. I think if we're not there, we're getting to that point. And what I tell people is that, I guess 2 points I would make. Number one, and I make this point in the book, there's all this great new technologies coming out there. And we keep hearing about blockchain, artificial intelligence, right? Internet of Things, robotic process automation, natural language processes. I could go on, right? And all of those are incredible tools that can be deployed to solve big problems. I call them fatal flaws in the book with insurance. But if they're just solutions by themselves or just technology by themselves, there's a lot of ways that you can essentially go wrong. And so I saw a lot of startups with cool new tech that they've developed, and it is cool. Like when you talk to the founders and you get demos, it's just amazing what capabilities are out there today with modern technology, and it's obviously emerging all the time. And we're living in a world of accelerating change. But at the same time, just because you have good tech and just because you have a good pitch deck that you're selling your VC on and you're getting funding, that is totally disconnected from actually doing a partnership with a carrier, right? If you're trying to do some type of working within the current ecosystem, or being successful on your own if you're looking to compete. I mean, that's just a whole different ballgame. And so, I do kind of expect that there's going to be a big washing out. It's be interesting actually to see what kind of interest rates do, right, with the Federal Reserve raising rates and whatnot. And if we do get to a recession potentially, there's some talk of that. So, I do think 90% of these are going to fail in the next 5 years. Having said that, there are going to be some that succeed and a few that are going to be household names probably in a decade, right? One point I make in the book is I list the top 10 P&C insurers. The youngest in the top 10 was founded in 1937. So rarely do you have an industry that the youngest player is over 80 years old. Yeah. I just don't think that's sustainable. I do think you're going to have newer names in there in 10 years and certainly 20 years. And we can see that with other companies and other industries, certainly, right? Amazon, Uber, others. So I think it would be remiss of us as insurance professionals to be so naive to think that can't happen in our industry.
Well, I've been listening to a great podcast called Zero to IPO, and they talk about when the technology changes, usually the major players change when the infrastructure is different. And I think I don't know, InsurTech, I'll call it pre 1.0 was like disrupt, different, like we're going to take over. And now they're kind of seeing that they need to work together and there's going to be a little bit of a commingling. I just think the two parties have kind of been humbled by each other a little bit, So.
What do you think, Nick?
Well, I think Allianz is going to struggle to deploy $1 billion.
Yeah.
And so
Newport Beach Insurance Center, we'll take 10 million. That's fine.
But I think there should be a big investment in rethought insurance. One, no, it's hard, and $1 billion's a lot, and so I don't know what direction they're going to go in with that. But to me, I think Rob kind of nails it, and I think InsurTech 2.0 has to be about like actual business, like. It can't be like, hey, look at this cool technology that streamlines this, and this digitally. It has to be, it does this to the bottom line. It increases revenue by this much. It gets us this many new leads. Like it has to be tied directly to a business outcome. I think that's
flashes out.
Yeah, I think that's the next step. Like it just. We saw there were companies I saw. I remember the very first one I went to was a Silicon Valley insurance accelerator. This was even before the word InsurTech existed. And frankly, I don't even think most of those companies they're either not around or something happened to them. So it's already happening. And so I think to deploy $1 billion, you got to make some huge deals because these little $1 million things you can't manage that.
A lot of those companies, when the funding was gone, it seemed like they're just kind of gone. And to your point, I feel like I'm trying to learn how to start like a healthy, small little brokerage. I feel like I'm going backwards to go forwards, try to understand the fundamentals, start a basic business, do that well. And I've heard investment should make a healthy business grow, but not necessarily start a business. It's kind of the mindset I'm in right now.
Well, things like take risk-based. Right? Yeah. Like you want to take risk. That just requires a ton of capital, no matter what. Even before the first policy you sell, you need tens of millions of dollars to be able to execute on that. So that's likely where they're going is in that kind of vein. But who knows? I was in a meeting yesterday, and one of the guys that was talking was saying how fronting carriers. So carriers that allow you to use their regulatory paper, but don't actually take any risk or take very minimal risk.
Mhm.
They're getting like 5 to 7 points, right? Just for taking no risk, just for renting their paper. And so there have been attempts like, hey, let's start a fronting carrier. Look at that, risk free, 7% risk free. And then this guy said, he's like, yeah, everyone's trying it, but no one's succeeding at it. So I can't explain why. So yeah, I think I guess that's the point Rob's getting to. The struggle with InsurTech is getting traction on these things, and I
Well, so one thing, and you and I even talked about this, Nick, about the book is, after it was written, a lot of people are saying, so who's this for, Rob? Is this for traditional incumbents or is this for startups and VCs? And I kept telling people it's for both. And
Yeah.
everyone's like, no, it can't be for both. No, you got to pick one. No, you can't, And I've always pushed back on it and say, no, there's something in here for everyone. And I truly believe that. If you are a traditional carrier or agent, or I talked to Chris Stanley in the IA Path. We did a podcast. We talk about the claims community and others. You need to know what's coming, right? You need to be prepared. You need to understand. And to me, this book is a wake up call to you, right? That you may think this stuff is, I know it's happening. I'm seeing articles about it. I don't really know what this blockchain thing is. I don't really know about AI or what that's going to do. That's probably going to be 8 to 10 years down the line. Maybe I'll be retired out of the industry by then. And I'm trying to tell them, no, the pace of change is accelerating. This stuff is here now. We all use Amazon and it's recommending books. I mean, I saw it with my own book, it's already recommending the two customers like you also bought the other two insurance nerds book. And oh, by the way, we're going to recommend that you look at the InsurTech book as well. Siri, right? Like, so we use a lot of AI that we don't necessarily think about it that way. My daughter asks Amazon Alexa every day, what's the weather going to be like? So she knows what to wear. She's 8, to school. But at the same time, for those VCs and startups, I even talk about the arrogance of Silicon Valley. We had somebody, I call him Victor, actually, it's not his real name as I found out, but he came to a CBCU meeting one year, and I said, oh, hey, so you want to learn about our industry? He goes, yeah, I want to learn, you'll all be out of a job next year. And I'm like, okay, it's been several years. We're all still going. We're all still here. We still got brokers, right? We still got MGAs and stuff. It's not that easy. There are some things that are special about insurance, and I know every industry says that, right? And so it's almost a crash course CPC in an hour in the book. So I talk about some very fundamental concepts. What's the loss ratio? What's the expense ratio? And Juliet Murphy is a co-founder of an Australian startup called FloodMap, and she said, Rob, I so wish I had your book a year ago, because when I started engaging with the insurance community, I didn't speak the language, and this kind of helped overcome that. And I have much more productive conversations. I had a lot of painful learning when I started getting into the industry. So despite everyone kind of pressing, you got to pick one or the other. I think there's some goodness in there for both. And the other point I make to people is, hey, if you already know what a loss ratio and expense ratio, you can skip over those parts, right? You don't have to read this cover to cover. You can. It certainly has that flow, but there'll be enough value in there for the parts that you don't know. I know Chris Stanley was like, man, some of the technology I've heard about, I didn't really understand. I didn't want to admit that I didn't understand it. He goes, your book was a perfect kind of basic explainer, introduction, not only to what the technology is at a high level, but why it's relevant or what it could do for our industry.
I feel like that's like a good Dos Equis answer, for the most interesting man in insurance. It's for both, startups and, incumbents alike. And I think,
but before you go, Brett, Rob, your story hits home, because that is one of the first, I guess, indications that you had this bifurcation in the market, right? So you had incumbent legacy that had a sense of arrogance, just because it's like, hey, this is the way we've been doing things for 40 years. Then you had these newcomers coming in, predominantly from the tech community, who's like, hey, we're going to take a model that we've used to upset the library business, the hotel business, and we're going to apply it to insurance. And it's like, not so fast. And I remember going to a conference with Tony, and Tony was telling me how he was having a conversation with a VC. And the VC was like, asking very astute questions, but basically like, okay, how do I get to $100 million in revenue quickly? And Tony and I had the same answer. It's just like, that's easy in insurance. Just undercut the price. but you're not going to make any money.
Yeah.
And then if you think you can make it up on the back end, you're fooling yourself, because as soon as you raise the price, you're going to lose the business. Like insurance is a little bit different, Rob. So there's a bifurcation. You're basically walking a tightrope to navigate the old business model that has worked for 300 years and a whole bunch of new technology. And how do you mix those two together? What comes out on the other side?
Do you think?
So, oh, go ahead, Brett.
No, you're good. Definitely hit that if you want. I had one last topic I wanted to try to put our toe in the water today, maybe after this.
So just real quick to build on that point, Nick, I was talking with Abel Travis, who does the Insurance Innovators Unscripted podcast, and he had a great statement. He said, if you drop me into an insurance company in 2018 and I were to walk around and watch everybody working, and then I got in my DeLorean and I went back in time 20 years and I got out and I walked around the insurance company, nothing would look different, right? It would all look the same.
That's crazy, yeah.
But then the question is,
computer monitors would be bigger.
Yeah,
that's about it.
Yeah. But play that forward into 2038, right?
Yeah.
Do we really think it's going to look the same in 20 years when we get in that DeLorean and go to the future? And I would say definitely not, right?
No way.
Tom Cruise movie with the screens, Minority Report. So the last one I want to touch on, and this may be like a cool bridge with the old and the new, because I think Hippo writes on pretty standard paper. And then they were weaving in Neptune now for flood insurance, which I think was Nick's big idea. Just include flood everywhere, it brings the price down, protects everybody, make it standard. I don't know why he's trying to put himself out of a job, but I like the idea. I like the intent. So Hippo and Neptune, you think that's the future? Kind of easy policy writing, plugging in catastrophic where it makes sense more fluidly?
I don't know. I think Rob and I are going to arm wrestle about this in New Orleans. My feeling is not plug it in where necessary. My feeling is it's always there.
Mm-hmm.
It's always there when you need it, instead of people going to seek it out.
Oh, I didn't know flood wasn't covered as my house, has a foot of water.
Yes. Yeah.
So
I think what I like about it, Brett, is again, this is where Nick and I are on a panel where we're probably on opposite ends of it. So I don't necessarily disagree with that. My take is it is not a space I see traditional carriers getting into. And my perspective really came from my previous role, where I was saying, look, I don't even write all the hurricane risk. I don't write all the wildfire risk. I don't write all the risks that I could today that I know. I know hurricane risk. I know wildfire risk. I don't know flood risk. So, if I'm still saying no to people in hurricane prone areas, I want to be able to write all of that before I move over to flood, which is something I don't know. So I do think that's where that partnership, right, is kind of an intriguing concept of, hey, we want to give everybody home and flood, but it's not Hippo saying we're going to do it all, right? Or it's not Neptune saying we're doing it all. You're taking each that has kind of their own area of expertise and blending it together in a package. I found that kind of a fascinating news item from this week.
It's cool. Yeah, we're seeing it all blend up. But, it sounds like you're going to be pretty busy coming up, Rob. I don't want to steal too much of your Saturday. Got a few stops, and we'll definitely get the book visits coming up in the notes.
Can we do the dates again for the book launch?
Yeah, real quick. So this Tuesday, which is going to be February 26th, we're in downtown Chicago, 6 to 8 p.m. Should be a great event. And then 2 in March right now. So New York City is Tuesday, March 19th, downtown at Enigma Technologies in downtown Manhattan. And then the following Monday at the Insurance Library in Boston. That's Monday, March 25th. We're hoping to add more tour stops and locations. So stay tuned to LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. There'll be a lot more from myself personally if you follow me, and certainly from insurance nerds as well.
Yep. Cool. Well, and I'll get this up shortly, and I'll bug you guys for some more details offline, and we'll get it out to the people. But good stuff, Rob. Thank you for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chicago.